September 11th, 2001 is a date that changed everything. Even if you weren't there to witness it, you've likely heard the stories. The chaos, the heartbreak, the unimaginable loss. It wasn't just buildings that were destroyed that day in New York City, at the Pentagon, and in a quiet Pennsylvania field. It was a moment that rewrote history and left a lasting impact on an entire generation. From rigorous changes in global security to the personal stories of lives that have been forever altered, the impact of that day is still felt around the world. But how did 9/11 shape the generation that lived through it? What lessons were learned? And how did it redefine how we see the world today? Now, it's time to delve deeper into this turning point in modern history. One story, one impact, one generation at a time. It was a normal Tuesday morning on September 11th, 2001. The sky was clear, and people went about their usual routines, heading to work, dropping kids off at school, or grabbing their morning coffee. The Twin Towers stood tall in New York City, which is a familiar part of the skyline. Everything seemed normal, and no one could have imagined how quickly that calm was about to be shattered. At 8:46 a.m., everything changed. A plane crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. People stared, confused, thinking it might be an accident. Then, at 9:03 a.m., another plane hit the South Tower. The people became suspicious, and it became clear this was no accident. Moments later, the Pentagon was struck, and passengers on United Flight 93 fought back against hijackers. By 10:28 a.m., both towers had collapsed. The city was covered in ash, and the world seemed to stop. Families searched for loved ones, and first responders risked everything to save others. The world watched in shock. Life was forever changed, and the memory of that day still lingers in the hearts of many. To understand what happened, here are the attacks that happened on that day. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, the U.S. was attacked in a way that shocked the world. 19 terrorists hijacked 4 commercial airplanes and turned them into weapons. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Just 17 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 hit the South Tower. By 9:37 a.m., a third plane hit the Pentagon. And at 10:03 a.m., passengers on United Flight 93 heroically fought back against hijackers, causing the plane to crash in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The Twin Towers collapsed shortly after, and nearly 3,000 people lost their lives. The attacks reshaped the world, forever changing how we think about security, travel, and the threat of terrorism. The 9/11 attacks were shocking, leaving an impact on everyone who witnessed it. For the people that grew up in its shadow, the world felt completely different. The comfort of daily life was replaced by fear and uncertainty. Airports became places of tension, with long lines, metal detectors, body scanners, and extra security checks that now felt normal. Suddenly, words like terrorism and homeland security weren't just headlines. They were part of reality. For young people who were in class, at home, or at work that day, the world shifted overnight. Life became about adapting to new security measures, cultural changes, and a deeper sense of responsibility. On TV, in movies, and in the news, stories of patriotism, resilience, and loss were everywhere, reflecting the emotions everyone felt. Many felt called to serve, leading to a rise in military enlistment as people wanted to contribute to the recovery of the country. After 9/11, the world began to change in ways no one could have imagined. The impact wasn't just felt in the US, but also across the globe, reshaping everything from politics to how everyone sees each other. The US quickly responded, launching military operations in Afghanistan to target the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and later invading Iraq in 2003. What followed were decades of conflict that affected millions of lives across the world. At the same time, Islamophobia spread. Muslim and Middle Eastern communities faced growing suspicion, prejudice, and even hate crimes. The fear of terrorism led to divisions, with many people feeling alienated or targeted because of their identity. For those who grew up in this environment, dealing with it became part of their everyday reality, shaping how they viewed the world. Beyond the social changes, the attacks forced countries to rethink their approach to security. Airports and borders became stricter, surveillance grew, and countries began working together to prevent future attacks. The world became more connected, but also more cautious, as the balance between freedom and safety was forever altered. The lasting impact of 9/11 has been felt globally not just for a short period of time, but even in the years that followed. From the way everyone lives to the policies that guide everyone, the changes became part of the daily life of the people. One of the biggest changes was in how people thought about safety and privacy. In the aftermath of the attacks, new laws like the Patriot Act expanded government surveillance, making people question how much freedom they were willing to give up for security. Airports became more secure, but this also sparked debates about individual rights. The trauma of that day affected countless individuals, from survivors to first responders. The emotional scars were deep, leading to a greater awareness of mental health. As people began to understand the effects of trauma, the recognition of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and the need for mental health support became important. PTSD became a central issue, not just for those directly involved, but also for veterans and emergency workers who had to live with the long-lasting impacts of the event. The facts and figures of 9/11 are written in history, but it's the personal stories of those who lived through it that truly show the human side of the tragedy. On that day, thousands of first responders, including firefighters, police officers, and medical personnel, ran toward danger when everyone else was running away. Many gave their lives in the process, and for those who survived, the physical and emotional scars still remain. The toxic dust and debris they breathed in have caused long-term health issues, and their courage is now honored through programs like the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund. For survivors, the memories are a mix of disbelief, luck, and gratitude. Some are haunted by survivors' guilt, while others have turned their experiences into powerful stories of advocacy and remembrance. The families of the victims continue to share their loved ones' stories, keeping their legacies alive. They make sure that each name, each face, is never forgotten, and they advocate for better support for those still feeling the effects of that day. These personal stories remind us that 9/11 wasn't just a historical event. It was a turning point in the lives of real people whose journeys of resilience and loss continue to resonate across generations. The impact of 9/11 reshaped global security, politics, and personal freedoms, with the loss of nearly 3,000 lives and the lasting trauma on survivors and first responders still felt today. The scars of that day continue to shape the lives of those affected. As we remember 9/11, we're reminded that while history shapes us, it's our response to tragedy that defines the future. What do you think was the biggest way it changed our world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in to our journey through the past. If you enjoyed exploring history with us, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. What historical events do you want us to dive into next? Keep exploring and catch us next time for more eventful insights.